everyone. Here we are with Michael Simkin, the creator and founder of Shmeiki Healing Organization. So Michael, what is all of this Shmeiki hullabaloo all about?
There's a lot of good to be gained out of all sorts of New Age practices. But when humans arrange themselves into groups, some weird shit starts to happen pretty quickly. And all the talk about authenticity tends to go out of the window due to group dynamics, especially when people are doing so-called spiritual practices and become very holy and start to pretend to be either sort of more present or more good than they really are. So the whole Shmeiki thing is about getting the good out of New Age stuff without getting trapped in the bullshit. And this arose out of traveling in India and coming across the New Age and realizing, oh wow, the stuff that there feels like something it holds something for me. I'm interested, but very quickly also feeling, this smells like the same sort of bullshit that I come from, the same sort of hypocrisy and two-faced business.
So what is Shmeiki?
Well, the spiel goes, it's not so much what Shmeiki is, it's what Shmeiki isn't. But Shmeiki is a light-hearted take on New Age spirituality. It's about taking the good out of what is and leaving behind the nonsense. So you can turn anything into Shmeiki. It's a process called Shmodification. So you can turn yoga into Shmoga, or Reiki into Shmeiki, or Tantra into Shmantra, or whatever you like. So what does that mean? It means look at a normal practice, do it, don't take it too seriously, don't do it for too long, keep changing it, and realize you can also make your own. There's like the spirit runs through all things, or the source runs through all things. So if you get a group of people together, a circle of people, and ask them to pat their heads with one hand and rub their tummies with the other while standing on one leg saying, I am a milkmaid, they will have a spiritual experience that is just as valid as any other, because life itself is the magic. So the practice itself is somewhat secondary.
I guess that depends on the practitioner or on the person practicing.
In what way?
Whether or not, I mean, you can't guarantee an experience.
No, I'm talking from my own experience, which is, if I'm, first of all, being part of a group is powerful. It has its own, when people are vulnerable and authentic in a group, some magic starts to happen. The actual, whatever the group is doing is less important. So that's within a group. And by myself, whether it's yoga or martial arts, if I'm breathing and matching my breath with movement, again, wonderful stuff starts to happen. So it's the movement itself that counts, not whether it's yoga or whatever name you might attach. So it's like the truth beyond the label.
So it's not that you have a problem with Reiki or yoga per se.
No, not in the slightest.
Because it is fair that a reader would maybe read something like Shmeiki and think, oh, this is either the antithesis to Reiki or stands in opposition to Reiki.
No. There's nothing wrong with Reiki. I mean, Reiki, by hands-on healing, is hands-on healing. I start to sort of smile ironically when people present themselves as Reiki practitioners, as though they're doing something more like secret and special.
It's like more like hands-off healing, isn't it? Hands-off.
Exactly. It's like where it's been turned into an identity. We so quickly we try to own shit, sort of like, rather than surfing on the surfboard, like holding it up and showing that we're surfers. And that's where it starts to stink a little bit. The bullshit. So yeah.
So tell us about the book. So the book is kind of like a spiritual guide.
First of all, the book is about me turning myself inside out in public, revealing my shadow. And I guess talking to my friends about my shadow was not enough. I grew up with a lot of shame, and I needed not just to talk about it, but I needed to paint it all over the wall. I needed to scream it and shout it.
So the book is autobiographical as well, but it's fictional.
It's exactly, and partly it's partly confessional, partly fantasy, partly
I mean,
it's an ideal.
all good storytelling is based in some truth, right?
Yeah, partly it's about experiences that I had in India, and partly it's about experiences that I'd like to have had in India. I didn't really walk across India without wearing shoes or without taking a credit card. I'd like to have done. I think that Shmeiki Baba is very much an idealized version of myself. It's like me on acid or something.
So did you actually experience an entity called Sheila that spoke to you through your hemorrhoids, or are you fictionalizing a character?
I'm not, as far as I know, psychotic. I have at times suffered from hemorrhoids. They've never spoken to me. I did have an ex-girlfriend who was very smart, and she was a therapist. And some of the things that Sheila in the book says might be similar to the things my ex said to me.
And she reminded you of a hemorrhoid, your ex?
No. That part, when it came to this whole channeling thing, I think I got into I kind of used to watch this guy he channels an entity called Bashar, and that used to make me smile. And I used to like to talk that way, and I realized, it's actually quite easy. It's not very difficult. I mean, I can go there now. And I was thinking a whole thing about this whole channeling thing and why people channel and why people listen to channels. And it seems that it's like a convenient relationship that if I'm a person who's looking for advice, but I've got a problem taking it, if I take that advice from someone who's channeling an entity, it might be easier to listen.
Yeah. I know the Bashar guy, and I don't know how I feel about channeling and Reiki as well. It is hard to believe that somebody else is having the experience, or if they're just trying to sell you on it.
Well, the question I was wondering to these guys who are channeling, like, do you really believe this stuff, or is it just a game? Because if you really think you're hearing voices, well, isn't that a type of madness? I don't
In
know.
a different setting, you'd have to lock them up.
Or not, because in other cultures, people suffering from what we call schizophrenia were called seers and visionaries. So I don't know. I'm not
I mean,
sure.
to have a spiritual relationship with hemorrhoids, I think everyone should aspire towards that.
Absolutely. Well, funnily enough, since I sort of did a lot of healing, since I accepted myself a lot more, I no longer really suffer from hemorrhoids. So it would be more difficult if, hypothetically, Sheila really did want to speak to me. Luckily, she can call me up on the telephone.
Is there a real Sheila?
Well, her name isn't Sheila, obviously. I told
Well,
you.
the character is based on somebody real anyway.
More or less, yeah.
Oh, that's good. And you're in touch with Sheila.
Definitely.
And
on
she
the
knows she's in the
cellular network and the cosmic pathway.
And how did the acronym of OSHO come about, of Om Shmeiki Healing Organization?
Well, that's purely a coincidence.
Oh, really?
Obviously, I mean, I wouldn't want to get sued by...
I mean, sometimes we make jokes, sometimes the universe makes jokes.
You got it perfectly.
Yeah, you don't want to get sued by those Osho people. That's a Sheila you don't want to mess with.
Yeah, I mean, I binge watched Wild Wild Country. It's amazing.
Beautifully shot.
And there's another German documentary about Osho, which I really enjoyed. And I have to say, I did spend time in Pune at the Osho commune in 2002-3. And I got many good stuff there. And I met lots of these old timers who did know the real Osho. And they had a sort of magic about them. And I felt very much drawn to them. And I felt that I missed being there in the 1980s and 90s. And there was some wonderful stuff going on as part of a bigger picture of maybe some less wonderful stuff going on. And I think I was very much influenced by Osho. I think I was also jealous of Osho, his intellect, his sort of his like deep charisma, his centeredness. But for that reason, especially Wild Wild Country was reassuring. It wasn't quite as centered as maybe I had thought before. Well,
Yeah, that's, for those of you who haven't seen Wild Wild Country, it is a really, really powerful documentation of the people of the town of Antelope, because it's one thing to say you're having an experience like a spiritual awakening coming through a Shmeiki healing ceremony, for example, but you can't force that experience onto people who aren't open to receive that experience.
the thing that struck me about that documentary was all the crazy shit that happened could have been avoided if they'd been just a little less arrogant. They had some naive thought that the American Constitution would save them, and because of that they could shove their sexual liberation and sense of freedom in other people's faces, who were super conservative people. If they'd just done it on their farm and kept it to themselves, it might still be going on today.
Oh yeah, I 100%
don't
agree
understand why they had to shove it in people's faces. It was an act of naivety and arrogance.
And now we've all gleaned some wisdom from that. You're not shoving Shmeiki in anyone's face.
No, nothing to shove. I know. I no
yeah,
longer have hemorrhoids.
There's nothing.
I'm not going to shove my hemorrhoids in anyone's face.
It's like missionaries. Then, like anywhere where it's like, I'm going to show up in a place and force my experience of the divine on to everyone. That's kind of like how I thought Wild Wild Country was extraordinary.
It was extraordinary. I loved it. By the way, I mean, the whole thing about cults in general is fascinating to me. I also binged watched the documentary about Nexium, the HBO documentary about this New York sex cult, where the guy is now in prison for the next 120 years or something.
Oh, the guy with the loads of wives.
Reveri. No, loads of wives. If you ain't seen that, I thoroughly recommend it. It's just,
okay. I'm thinking.
And another really, and this is the whole thing about the shadow and the dark side. First of all, it's a cult called Nexium that did really well. The daughters of the Seagram's Empire funded it. And there's this very, very smart guy whose first name I can't remember, his family name is Reveri. And it went on for years, and it was a cult that grew and grew. And the thing is, in their methods and in the spiel, the talk, it was excellent. I was listening to the good stuff that they were saying, thinking, wow, there's some power here. It's really good.
Wow.
But then there was this total denial of the dark side and total denial of shadow, and it turned into some under the covers sadomasochistic game whereby they were being branded with the initials of the guru and one of the women who was some ex-Hollywood star, and it was all under the table, and it turned into some very, very weird power game. Now, my attitude to it was, all the shit that happened there, if it had been done honestly and with the lights on, and just sort of acknowledging, hey, I enjoy controlling and manipulating people sometime. For the next hour, can I control and manipulate you? Then it would become a healthy game, because some of us need to play games like this. But without admitting that honesty, it was abuse, which is why the guy's in prison now. It was like another disaster that didn't need to happen. It's like, why do cults develop? Because there's some amazing power in a group, especially in a group that's exploring consciousness. It just seems that almost always it runs off the rails, because people find it difficult to remain authentic, and they also find it difficult to admit the dark side.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think that happens a lot with spiritual bypassing, any sort of. It's very easy also, if you're not part of a culture, to come into a practice, like Reiki, like yoga, and take all of the bits that you like, and oh, I like this pose, and I like this breathing. This one's hard, so I'm not going to do that one, and everything's kind of like go at your own pace. There's no proper guidance. So I think that it becomes really easy to kind of pick and choose, like you're at a salad bar of your own development. And it's not like that. You got to step away from the salad bar and just let experiences unfold and surrender into them.
Absolutely. What is self-acceptance for me? It's acknowledging all parts of myself, and that includes my shadow. And in my shadow are the things that I have trouble acknowledging about myself. Otherwise, it wouldn't be my shadow. So it means the sides of, in my case, there's a side of me that wants to control and even hurt people. And also there's a side of me that wants to be controlled and to be hurt. And it's taken me years to be able to acknowledge that and be upfront about it, because it's embarrassing.
Well, what is embarrassing? The act of making other people uncomfortable, or the sharing vulnerability, or sharing something about yourself that you think maybe the person that you're sharing with is going to be like, that's weird?
Well, there's both sides. First of all, we're brought up to pretend to be nice, and we're not always nice. I've got these teeth that are meant for ripping flesh, so I'm generally nice, but sometimes I'm not nice, and that conflicts with this whole be nice, especially growing up in England. And then there's the other side of it, which is I was brought up to be a man, but at times I like to be submissive, and that's anything but being a man.
It does become very fragmented, doesn't it? It's like, be nice, don't be not nice, and if you're being not nice, that's not nice. So don't do that. Instead of how to be graceful and how to acknowledge the sides of ourselves that are so not nice, and allow them to exist and breathe in spaces where they're not damaging to anyone else.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And so this whole thing. There are all these different potentialities within us, and we need space to be a safe space to be able to lift off the masks and become those things with consent.
And even this idea of safe space is something that gets thrown around in spiritual worlds very much. I heard a definition I really like, that a safe space is a space where you are safe to be unsafe.
Ooh. Sure thing.
Where you can make mistakes, and you can say something, problematic, because you need to hear it to understand for yourself.
Quite absolutely. And I've been to a whole bunch of these different Tantra groups. This is the whole Tantra thing in the Western Tantra sense of saying what you want, saying what you don't, being authentic about your boundaries. The theory is one thing, the reality is another, because
oh my,
really going to the depth of it and of being truly authentic, well, it involves revealing the slightly darker, more monstrous sides of ourselves, and not everybody's able to or willing to do that.
And those Tantra gatherings are so expensive. I can imagine, if you've invested thousands of dollars to be in Guatemala on a permaculture, you're like, okay, I've invested so much, my experience is going to look like this. and it's just, I'm just going to be levitating the whole time, you know, and anything done to compromise that, you know, then it's like some
Yeah, we're carrying around this basic message, please like me, which conflicts with the other side of I need to show my shadow. So what you said, give me a safe space to not be safe is exactly it. I guess another side of it, which is tricky, is that we're so hopeful and optimistic that at times we kid ourselves we're getting there when we're not really, and that's the whole spiritual bypassing thing.
So who needs Shmeiki in their lives?
You do.
Me specifically, or the big Q?
I mean, ideally everybody, because as many people buy this book will do me and personally a lot of good. But putting that nonsense aside, anyone who has come in contact with spirituality and smelt some bullshit and felt a little disappointed will probably appreciate this book. Anyone who's been to India as a tourist and watched tourists sort of all suddenly become very holy when there's a guy with a beard might also find it amusing. It's a comedy about all the crazy shit that happens at spiritual groups. And if enough people buy it, there will be a sequel.
And last question, why do you think that you used comedy as a vehicle to share?
Comedy is what's missing from spirituality. God, people take their beliefs so bloody seriously. And I believe means I think that maybe. So like, without comedy, it's just more of the same. Like, I would encourage everyone to be a little bit comical about spiritual practices, whatever they are. Like, wow. Funnily enough, one thing that dear Osho did say, which I love, is seriousness is one step away from violence. And there's something in that. Like let's laugh about let's not be so sure about our beliefs. Like, remember the maybe. Like that's so freeing. Like,
seriousness is one step away from violence.
Apparently so.
That's pretty good. I think that's good. I think that's a good place to close.
Boyakasha.
It got very
it got very dark here, but I can still see my face is still visible.
You still look very illuminated.
Well, that's because I'm fucking enlightened.
There, inner light.
Am I more spiritual than you?
You don't need a ring light when you have inner light.
Amen. It's been nice talking to you.
Great speaking to you too, Shmeiki Baba / Michael Simkin. So you are not Shmeiki Baba. Shmeiki Baba is a fictional character created by the very real Michael Simkin.
Yeah, I just like to play the character occasionally.
Channel.
Yeah. Enjoy.
Thank you for this great channeling.
Thank you for asking these wonderful questions.
Oh, absolutely. My pleasure.
Wish you deep meditation and masturbation.
And wobbling of all chakras.
Tika tika.